Okay, so the styrene channel I'm going to be using, I've taken some strips and cut them to the rough size of the outside of this window, and it's going to basically serve as the window trim here. So I'm going to be using Plastruct 90711 here. You can see the size of the strip we're using. This is perfect for window frame material. I used it in the last time I did the window screens for a car like this. Anyway, I have the strips cut to size, and I'm basically going to apply them using the super glue as usual. So we'll move this relatively close so you guys have a good view of this here. What I'm going to do, over on a piece of paper here in this corner, I'm just going to take a little bit of super glue, pull it up. I'm going to start with these small strips first that are going to go on top and underneath the screen. I'm just going to get a little bit of glue on this part. I don't want too much. I'm just going to line it up as carefully as I can directly underneath the screen like this, and once it's in position, just carefully adjust it, make sure it's right up against that screen. And check it from the side here, it looks pretty good. Go ahead and do the next piece here. We'll put this piece on the top, and again we'll just as careful as we can just position it like this and let that set up. That's good. Finally, the outer bracing. Again, just use small little bits of glue. You really don't want to get too much paint residue on your weathering at this point. And then just square it up like this. There we go. Nice and squared up. One more here, just to give you the complete demonstration of the method. This piece again will position on the outside of the screen, drop it in place, move it into its final position, and then put some pressure around the corners just to make sure everything is nice and evenly applied so that it can dry evenly. And that's pretty much it. So if we take this off, you guys can see what that looks like. That's basically the completed window screen. That'll of course get painted silver and get weathered together with the car body, but that's basically how I'm going to do all the window screens. So I'm going to go ahead and do the angled window screens for the window here, and then install the other 3 screens on the opposite side here. So with the window screens completed, it's another nice detail added to the car that just makes it look a lot more authentic. Obviously the only other thing we got to do with these windows at this point is paint the window frames and the mesh silver, which I'll do later on towards the end of the weathering, and then we got to add the window glazings to all the windows as well. On the side that we'd worked on originally, you can see we got this window frame done. We just need to patch up this little area where you can see the joint. We'll just fill that in with a little bit of putty, and you won't be able to see that seam. And then I got the angled window screens done as well. You guys can see it. Those are installed and they look really good. Alright, so we're going to start with the most obvious bit of weathering. As you can see, there's a multitude of little primer patch spots that they did on this car where they took a combination of Bondo and gray primer, as you can see on this side, to basically patch some rust pits that these cars were notorious for. So we're going to try to model all this first. As you can see, it's pretty extensive. We got all kinds of little dots everywhere, so we're going to do our best to try to replicate this as best as we can. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. So I'm just painting the primer spots in their positions that I can see on the car, where they did them anyway. Let's see, there we go. This is just sort of a random job that they did. They're just kind of scattered all around, so there's a relatively large cluster down here. Try to get in position. Okay, so onto the primer spots now. I'm going to be using two main colors here. I got some bright red, black, and earth brown, and these are my main colors to create the primer tone that they used on this Caboose as well. Not just the gray primer, but the red primer as well. So all I got to do here is just take a little bit of these colors and mix them together until I create the color that's relatively reasonable. Obviously the black is the last color added here. You don't want to do too much because it's very overpowering and it'll darken the color way too quick. So it's mostly brown and the red here to create the color that we need. Once we come over to the model, as you can see, I've put a couple spots on so far. Just trying to do one side just to kind of see what things look like, but this is going to be really the characteristic of the site here, is doing these spots. So it's just a matter of picking one little spot to work in to start and then just starting to lay them on like this. I'm going to be doing several layers of these spots, and in this particular case, just like the gray spots, these took a couple coats to completely cover. So I'll go back over these a couple times throughout this process just to make sure that they're completely covered here. So you can see these spots are just absolutely all over the place, and this is all the rust spots that they basically patched up. So I'm being pretty heavy with all my little spots and such, and just kind of, it's just very random here, and it's pretty hard to get all these spots exactly where they are on the prototype, but if you can at least get them all relatively close, then that's what matters. As long as you have a somewhat accurate representation, that's what matters, is my point here. So just try to do your best in a project like this. Okay, so in about 5 hours, this is what we've gotten. We got all the spots taken care of on this side, primer spots. The window frames are painted. As you can see, I went in with some silver paint and touched up the ends, basically the window frames, not the mesh. Painted those silver, and then I just went over all of them with a whitewash so that they look a little bit oxidized. And then I just went into the screens by taking a black wash, filling in only the screens, and then I took some black powders and just darkened them up a little bit, and then put a brown wash over that once all that was done. So everything's looking really good here. It's starting to look exactly like the prototype, which I'm very happy with. So just to show you, if I actually pull up the main photo again, this one right here, I'll take the model next to the real car. Bam! There you go. It's looking pretty good. Alright, so the opposite side here is going to be, I think, the hardest out of all. There's a lot more spots on this side, and we're going to have to do a lot of work here, so we're going to go ahead and get started on the opposite side here. So if you guys look, you can basically see what I've done now. I'm pretty much using the exact same techniques as before, but on this side I'm using a slightly different color for the pitting and areas where they basically patched this up with primer. You can see it's kind of a purplish rust color, and that's what I'm trying to kind of recreate. Now that I did that, I'm just going back and filling in all my little rust pits with a custom mixed color of dark earth and black to do all the little bits of rust pitting that are around these windows here. I'm trying to use prototype photos as carefully as I can here. Working right now on all of the pitting on the chassis system logo itself. As you can see, it's quite extensive. It's all over the place. This is a little bit easier here because this side's not as infected. There are a lot of primer spots that I'm going to have to do with a different color in a second, but we'll come back with that red color we used on the opposite side to do those in a second. Right now I'm just worried about getting these larger pits painted. And now with that taken care of, we can come in with our red primer tone and do all the red spots now, very carefully. This pattern of dots is quite interesting. I mean, it's really what makes this car unique, the way they tried to do all the patch repairs to these little areas. It's a unique little feature. Just trying to get them as close to the exact positions as possible here. They're mainly around the bottom here. There's that little area around the window where it looks like they did some sort of primer work to try to stop some of these rust pits again. But for the most part, it's concentrated at the base, right underneath the logo in particular. So I'm just going to try to replicate this as best I can here. Just doing it one little bit at a time. If I didn't already say it again, these first couple dots mark the position of where they should be, and then I'm just going to basically follow behind these several times with some different coats, several different coats in varying colors to get them the right shade. Some are a little heavier, some are a little darker than others, so I'm just kind of varying this again, just like before. Okay, there's one last decal I'm going to go ahead and install with the majority of the rust work and everything done. I'm going to go ahead and install it now, that way I can do the final weathering effects over this particular decal, and it is the data label that they re-stenciled around the time that the car got the patch jobs on the ends and everything like that. So what I'm going to be using for this is a decal from Microscale off of a recent sheet that they released. This has the most accurate data that I've seen for this particular car to match. That being said, I will still have to modify the decal a little bit after it's applied. So what I'm going to be using for this small little area is a little bit of microsol and a small brush to go ahead and apply this. So for small decals, I always just use the microsol. If they don't stick very well, I'll go with the Solvaset, but again, the Solvaset's a little bit more aggressive, and I don't like to use that on very small decals if I don't have to, just because it can have a tendency to shrink them pretty bad. So I'm just going to carefully position this decal in place and call it good for now, and then we'll come back later and modify this. But I'm just going to try to position this according to prototype photos, and it's kind of positioned right off the sill there, and it's very clean and recent like this, so that's why I decided to leave this off up until this point. There we go. Once that's in position, then we can just follow behind with a little bit more microsol, and we'll let that sit up a little bit. What I'll do after this little layer of microsol dries is I'll take a Q-tip, blot it down a little bit to make sure it's completely flat on that surface, and then I'll put one more coat of microsol on it. I'm going to repeat this process as well for the opposite side of the car. So with the sides done, mainly with the acrylics, we're going to go ahead and tackle the roof now. And this is something where you got to do a little bit of modeler's license, a little bit of creative liberty here. I don't have prototype photos of the roof. I can't really get prototype photos of the roof. I could go visit the real car and climb up on the roof, but I don't really feel like getting arrested for stupid reasons like that, so that's not going to happen that way. So I don't really have any clear images of the roof shot. I remember seeing a picture of the roof by accident, actually, when I did some overhead shots of the yard in Foster, Ohio, back when I was modeling it. I remember I could actually see the caboose in the yard, and I saw somewhat what the roof looked like. And the weathering on the roofs, for the most part, is pretty consistent with these cars. It's very, very bad. These things just were notorious for rusting like crazy. Mainly on the porch overhangs here. These would just get completely rusted over, and then you'd have heavy rust patches, similar to what you'd see like on box cars and stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to do here. I'm not going to get too crazy, so I'll just go ahead and show you guys this. I'm going to be using my standard trick of earth brown and black first. And I'm going to make a pretty dark color over here in the corner. I think you know what I'm going for here. You guys are probably also aware of what I'm going to do next, but this is going to be the base coat for the oils that I'm going to put on later. I always use my burnt umber to do the rest of the detailing, but the acrylic is a good way to kind of serve as a base for the effect to model the heavier areas of rust. So what I'm going to do is just basically take my Citadel brush here, and I'm just going to basically go in and start putting some heavy patches of rust all along the roof. Oops, sorry about that. I'm just going to start filling these panels in like this until I get them all painted.